Welcome to the Sage Advice Podcast, transforming the way people think and work so their organizations can thrive. Well, hi everyone, and welcome to our podcast. I'm Ed Kless, and today's episode is cut from another podcast of which I am the co-host, The Soul of Enterprise, which is also sponsored by Sage. The Soul of Enterprise is dedicated to belief that business has a spiritual, though not necessarily religious, component. I hope you enjoy this excerpt. If you do, please visit www.thesoulofenterprise.com for more.
Awful. We've never had so much journalism and so many outlets, which is great, but politics and journalism have merged, and journalists behave like politicians. And the public treats journalists like politicians. And tribalism has set in. People, like politicians, journalists often appeal to their base, to their constituency. And they tailor what they say to the readers instead of just giving it straight by their own lights, and some will like it and some won't. And so I've seen a lot of journalists begin to act like politicians with political calculations, and that's crippling to a writer, absolutely crippling. You've got to be free at the keyboard to pursue the truth as you find it. And I wrote something recently where someone criticized J.K. Is it Rowling or Rowling?
Rowling. I would say Rowling.
And someone said, can't you learn to read the room? If a writer reads the room, most of the time, it is the kiss of death. You're not supposed to pander to an audience. I don't even like politicians who do this. And it's fatal to a writer. You can't be a real writer while worrying about the room and pandering to an audience.
We had author Warren Berger, not the Supreme Court Justice, different guy with an E, who's written a wonderful book that Ron and I both love called A More Beautiful Question, referencing the E.E. Cummings poem. And he said,
I don't know it.
His big challenge is he thinks that journalists just have gotten lousy at asking questions. They just don't know how to ask questions anymore, as silly as that sounds. They just like to talk about themselves.
It takes, to ask questions, you must have a great sense of security. There are a lot of people, there are interviewers and other journalists who like to show off. They're a little insecure and they want to prove what they know. The real interviewer wants to draw from the interviewee what the interviewee, knows. Bill Buckley was great at this. Bill Buckley was very, very smart and very, very knowledgeable. Everyone he met, not just on television, he wanted to learn something from the people he met. He knew a lot. Everyone knew it. He had plenty of opportunities to show off. When he was with you, he wanted to get from you what you knew that he didn't. And that expanded him. And he was a very expansive person. How do I tell the story and protect the guilty at the same time? I was in a room full of journalists, and we were talking to the national security advisor to the Israeli prime minister. Lots of people gave sort of speeches about the Middle East and maybe remembered to tack on a question at the end. They wanted to prove that they knew stuff and so on. Finally got to me. I'm sorry to tell the story because I'm the hero of it, so I feel like a jerk for telling it. But it got to me, I said, what's Sharon like to work for? I didn't care what I knew about the Middle East. I knew a hell of a lot about the Middle East. But I wanted to get from him something he knew that I didn't. And this young fellow, I think he was in his 30s, gathered himself, paused for a long time, and delivered himself with the most interesting answer of what it was like to work for this complicated man. Because that's something he could tell me that I didn't know. I wasn't even especially interested in his views on Gaza because they were a dime a dozen. But he could tell me that.
For more Sage advice, visit and subscribe at sageadvicepodcast.com.